Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and this is Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please subscribe to our channel. Please hit the notification bell so you know when the new videos are coming out. Go to our website, www.legendofthesuperstitionmountains.com. You can find all kinds of cool stuff there, plus the merch section. Pick up a t-shirt or a hat. Be kind of cool. Be styling and profiling. That being done, let's get into it. The next story that comes along, and this was a story that I didn't think would make the grade. There's always a pile of folders, and like I've said before, I go through them, and this one's okay, and I start reading them, and if I lose interest in the story or it just seems too familiar, too similar to a story I've told before, I'll just push it aside. And this story, I don't know why I kept it with the pile, because I went through it because there wasn't nothing to it. It's about this San Jose del Tucson mission. Now it gets confused with a couple others. The mission's established around 1678. It's one of the problems that was happening in the area at the time was San Xavier was getting a lot of attention, but Tucson was settling, and the captain there decided in the area to move the soldiers in the garrison from Tubac up to Tucson. And with that, the padre there, I'm going to get his name right, Father Francisco Tomas Garces, he had him move from San Xavier to this new mission site. New mission sites in the Tucson area, and it had a garrison of soldiers and a number of things. The mission didn't last very long. Because of the town and its growth and so forth, the mission eventually is gone. By the 1880s, the mission's long gone. So it was a very temporary mission. San Xavier, obviously, and other areas, Tubac and other areas, survived much better. It gets confused with other missions, but this was a mission unto itself. I've never found really any references. I don't know where the exact site was in the Tucson surrounding area, but there was reports around the turn of the century. You could still see a few of the walls. Now, a lot of the mission was taken apart, and the bricks and other things from the mission were used in homes in the area in Tucson as they were developing. So the stories kind of come out of there, but it was labeled in this folder as the mission without a treasure, because people went out and, of course, dug around and figured there had to be something there. One of the few things found was there was a gold Spanish coin found there. One single coin. Another gentleman, I want to get the name right so we can kind of always make sure, there's J.D. Burgess, found a bronze box of some sort there that could or could not have carried some sort of treasure, but it was noted in a newspaper article he found the bronze box. Another individual, sometime around 1880, digging out there, found the skeleton of a man and a dog. And that's the entirety of our story, it seems. But I'm going through the file, and it's repetitive. Each author wouldn't add, but he tried to find a way to make the story longer. They're paid by the word. And I'm looking at it through Penfield, Oscar Branthus, Xanthus Cars. I'm going through all these different people, and I'm thinking there's not much to the story, and then there's a bunch of a story typed up, and it's kind of in an interview form. And I start reading that, and it kind of predates some of this, but then I realize I get very interested, and it's kind of the rest of the story that's not publicly acknowledged, and I couldn't find anything else to go with it. Involves a Pima, an older Pima Indian at this time. One of the authors is talking to him and mentioning something about the missions, and he was writing a number of these different stories about the different missions and treasures and lost mines of the area. And he talked about the mission in Tucson and said it wasn't there very long, but there was always suspected early on that there's some treasure, but they learned very quickly that nothing was really being found out there and people dismissed it. Well, a gentleman comes into town and his name's Morgan. We don't know if it's his first or last name. He's just known by Morgan. He comes into Tucson. He wants to know where the mission site is. People tell him, but say, hey, people have dug around there. This is somewhere in the mid to late 1800s, after Burgess had found this casket in the mission area. And Morgan's kind of like, okay, so he packs, gets the supplies, and he goes over, stays out by the mission for a few weeks. He comes back into town. People figure he spent his time out there, didn't find anything, and he's going back to California where he's from. The railroad is in Tucson at that point, so he rides out. I think it's the Standard Pacific. He's gone, but a few months later, he returns. And they're like, huh, here's Morgan again. So they vaguely remember him. He goes back out, and he's out there for some period of time. Again, after 2 or 3 weeks, he returns. And he has his baggage that he has, and he leaves again, and they're thinking, okay, well, maybe this is, what is he looking for? What's going on? Well, one of the ranchers is getting kind of suspicious because he's saying the guys went out and he's camping out in this same area 2 times now, something to do with the mission, but there should be nothing there, but why did he return? So the 3rd time Morgan shows up, he shows up with a partner. And this catches everyone's attention is, why is he bringing help? We don't know what he's been doing out there. We don't know what he's leaving with. There's nothing out there. So this rancher, which is unnamed, the Pima never says the guy's name. I haven't been able to find that. But the Pima, who's known as John, doesn't help us much, says that the rancher asked him, he was 16 or 17, to kind of go out and kind of be inconspicuous, but keep an eye and see what these guys are doing, where they're camped, and if they're digging or what they're doing out there. So John the Pima follows them out, stays up in an area where he can keep an eye on it. And he says the first day or so, they don't do anything. They just sit there, they cook, may have their meals, they sit there. You can tell they're talking. He says one man has a small book. He's able to see better later when he gets closer. And it's just, he writes in it occasionally, but it's maybe a journal or diary. But he says there's nothing other than they're just out there camping. And then one morning he gets up, it's 3rd or 4th morning, and they're both gone from camp. And he's like, where'd they go? But their stuff is there and the fire's smoldering, so he figures they'll be back. He works around to find some higher ground where he can look down and see where they're approaching from, get an idea, hoping they won't come up from behind him or something. And sees them come up across, and they're carrying a little box. And each of them has a side of it, and he watches them walk back to camp. And they set the box down. And he said, he told the rancher, and he told this author, then they proceeded for the next day or so just to sit there. He said, now at night, they would keep the fire going low, and one of them would always be awake, stay awake, and then wake the other after 3 or 4 hours. He said he finally woke up, realized both of them were gone, and headed back to town, so he hurried to follow them to see what they were doing. By the time he gets into town, he realizes they must be in their rooms, gotten rooms or something. He doesn't know where they're at, so he runs out to tell the rancher. By the time the rancher comes in to make an inquiry, they're already gone. They got on a train and they left town. And no one seemed to notice this box or anything, so they're kind of, huh. So the rancher says, I don't know. He and John go out. They look around, can't figure out anything. Look at their camp. They have no idea what they're doing. So that's that again. But then Morgan shows up with the other gentleman again. This time the rancher says, you kind of follow him. I'll meet you out there. And he meets John out there, and they sit there. And the first day or so, nothing happens. And then very early in the morning, they go both to leave. And they kind of watch where they go. They go back, they go east, and then they go down into this wash. They go down in the back of this wash, and they start traveling down the wash. But these guys realize we would be too obvious. We'd be silhouetted, so we just got to kind of keep an eye and see if we can tell how far they travel. No real luck. They finally back up and they find a place to sit to watch, hoping they'll come out around where they went in. And they do, sure enough, eventually, almost a day later, the end of the day, in the afternoon, they come out and they're carrying a box bigger than the one that John saw them the first time. And they're each carrying a side of it, and they would occasionally stop, set the box down, just stand there, look around for a few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, pick up the box, start walking again. They got back to camp, they set the box down, and John said they did the same thing, except this time was just basically a day, but they just waited. But he said it was very odd. It was like they were sitting in, you can't understand the conversation, but he said they would be like, you wouldn't expect them to be, then they would get up, pack things up really quickly, and then just leave. The rancher figured they were basically coming to camp, sitting, kind of giving it time to see if anybody was passing through, if they caught any wind of anybody, and then when they were leaving, doing the same, kind of letting it sit and make sure there was nobody in the area before they left. By the time John and him got to town, they had gone to their rooms. They'd gotten rooms, or they had rooms already that the rest of their things were in. They kind of like, next thing they knew is they were out, they got on the train, and they were gone again. So the rancher asked the hotel or saloon keeper, where the rooms were, can we see the room? And odd inquiry, but hey, here's $1. Can we see the room? They went in, and there was a wooden box. It was approximately 18 inches by about 8 to 10 inches wide, and I think it was said it was about 8 to 10 inches deep, high. They realized, and it had some dirt and stuff on it. It looked very old wood. It was all just kind of starting to fall apart a little. And they realized this must be what they're digging out from wherever they're at. They see that there's actually the box. There's actually a remnant, and they've seen something left behind by these two gentlemen, Morgan and his partner. And they sit back and don't think much of it, but they wait to see if he returns again. It's not the talk of town. Nobody's seeing these guys bring anything into town. But the rancher and John the Pima have realized there's some sort of activity happening. About 6 months or so go by, and then John says he saw the partner in town, but there's no Morgan. And he made a couple inquiries, and the partner, really neither of them were ever very talkative, but he informed someone that Morgan had passed away, and that he was there to take care of some final business of him and his partners. And nobody knew what that quite meant, because nobody had a bill of sale or any money that they needed paid. The guy was around town for a day or two, and then suddenly he disappears out of town. John goes out to follow him, goes out by the camp, can't really find him where they camped before. Then decides he doesn't know where he's at. He must have went down the wash. He doesn't know if he should be messing with that. So he goes to head down, and he sees the partner down by the mission ruins. And he's down there, and he can hear he's breaking or doing something. And he's listening and watching and trying to be very cautious, but he's really curious, and he says he can tell he's hammering something. And so he waits till he leaves. The gentleman gets into town, just has his baggage in his hands, and he leaves. John gets the rancher and tells him exactly what happened, said, I didn't really have time to come get you. He didn't go to the camp. He didn't seem to be going down to that wash. He seemed to be over by the mission. So they went to the mission. What they found around one of the remaining low walls was he had been taking, looked like flagstone or pieces of flat stone that might have been some sort of flooring or something, and he was breaking them up. And they went through, there was still a hammer there. The Pima John said that he had left that sledgehammer or whatever he used to break the pieces of rock there behind. So whatever it was, he broke it into small enough pieces that they took every piece of everything they could to see if there was writing, a map, design, something on there. They could make nothing off of it. It was completely obliterated. For many years after that, the rancher and John the Pima would search the area, go down the wash. They looked for signs where there might have been digging, something might have been buried. Later, John said after the rancher had passed away, he still made a few trips. Could never understand what it was. There must have been something significant that the first man, Morgan, had found at that mission on something, a flagstone, some piece of something, and found something. He said, I can't tell you it was treasure. I can't tell you it was gold. All I know is they would bring these boxes in. They would empty the boxes into their baggage. They would load their baggage and leave town and return. And he said they did it at least, the partners did it at least twice. He said, and then the partner came out to make sure nobody knew where it was. He said, I don't know if there was nothing left or if the other man basically knew the directions or the location and decided to make sure that nobody else would find it, the deposit and whatnot. Far as John knew, the other gentleman never returned to Tucson. So that's the story of San Jose, the San Jose mission of Tucson, in Tucson proper. That really wasn't a treasure story, but turns out there was something to it. And I kind of get it now where the authors were looking at it as there was, other than that one single gold coin and the couple skeletal remains, there was the brass box, but none of the other stuff really made the grade. And if it hadn't been for the rancher and John the Pima actually kind of watching these guys, no one would have had a clue that they were bringing this other stuff out. They were bringing it in, dispersing it into their baggage, and then just leaving the boxes behind. No one suspected the boxes to have anything or what their use or what it was. So there you go. I tried to research as much as I could of this one and could come up with nothing. It was sending me a dozen different places that I knew it wasn't. There's very little information other than what they say of that San Xavier, about 1678, they decided to move and have a small garrison in Tucson proper, and they had established the mission San Jose del Tucson. And the padre from San Xavier went there for a while they ran that, and then later they moved everything back out because the mission wasn't needed anymore, probably because the town was established better and there was probably other garrisons in the area. So there you go. Hope you enjoy that one. It's an interesting one. It's always a puzzling one. You're never quite sure of like what it was they were finding. Was it some sort of artifacts from the church? And why was it a considerable distance? Was it unrelated to the church? And what was this that was on the stones? Why were they breaking the stones? It's kind of a cool mystery of which we have almost zero answers. But it's a story worth keeping on because we never know what we'll find. Everybody can say, hey, there's nothing here. Well, obviously Morgan and his partner did pretty well out of this deal, it appears. So there you go. There's Chasing Legends this week. Hope you'd enjoyed it. We hope to be back on track with the lives this Friday. This last Friday kind of fell out a little. I was on the road to Flagstaff and it was suddenly 3:50 and I realized I'm nowhere near. But there's no way I'm going to make it back. So we're driving in. I had to pick up the kids in Flagstaff and 4 o'clock rolled around and we were still on the road 4:15, 4:30. Suddenly it's almost 5 o'clock and I realize even trying to late start, Trevor equally was coming from Williams. I was coming from Flagstaff. He was coming from Williams on a separate trip, and he wasn't going to be here to even just kick it on and start something for me. So he didn't get into town, I think, until just after 4 o'clock, and he was still on the road to get home. So it was just one of those things that becomes a wash. There's nothing we can do about it sometimes, and it would buffer too much to try to do it in the truck moving through the mountains. So there you go, but we will return and we will be back. Thank you for watching Chasing Legends. Leave us your comments. Love to answer those comments. Sometimes not as much because this week I had about 150 comments to answer to and check. But we will. We always do in the end. Thank you for watching. Hope you join us again next Monday for Chasing Legends. And remember, the most important thing, right? You know what it is. We can all say it with me. I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.